Two people, same city, same problems, same rising prices, same shrinking opportunities, and yet they hate each other, not because of what they've done, but because of what they believe the other represents. That's the strange part. In a world where most people are struggling in similar ways, anger isn't aimed at the system. It's aimed sideways, at each other. Why? To understand that, you have to stop looking at hate as an emotion and start looking at it like an outcome, a predictable result of incentives, pressure, and scarcity. Because right now, the modern economy is quietly creating the perfect conditions for division. And it starts with something simple: pressure. Over the last few decades, life has become more expensive, but not in a dramatic, obvious way. Not overnight. Slowly. Quietly. Relentlessly. Housing costs creep up. Education gets pricier. Healthcare becomes heavier. Even basic food prices feel different now. At the same time, wages don't keep up. Not really. Yes, incomes rise on paper, but after adjusting for real costs, many people feel like they're running faster just to stay in place. And when people feel stuck, they look for reasons. That's human nature. But here's the twist. The real causes of economic pressure are complex, distant, and often invisible. Global supply chains, monetary policy, asset inflation, automation. These aren't things you can point at easily. You can't argue with them at dinner. You can't blame them in a comment section. So the brain does something clever. It simplifies. It replaces complicated systems with simple targets. Instead of "the system is squeezing me," it becomes, "they are taking what should be mine." And suddenly, frustration has a face. Now add the second layer. Competition. Modern economies are built on competition. That's not new. But what has changed is how personal that competition feels. Jobs are more uncertain. Career paths are less stable. Opportunities feel limited. When there's enough for everyone, differences don't matter much. But when people believe there isn't enough, everything becomes a zero-sum game. If someone else wins, you lose. If they succeed, it must be at your expense, even if that's not actually true. And this is where perception becomes more powerful than reality. Because once people start thinking in zero-sum terms, cooperation collapses, trust fades, and suspicion grows. But there's a third force quietly amplifying all of this. Algorithms. Social media platforms don't just show you content. They optimize for engagement. And nothing drives engagement like outrage. Not happiness. Not calm discussion. Not nuance. Outrage. Because outrage keeps you watching. It keeps you clicking. It keeps you sharing. So the system learns, and then feeds you more of what works. More conflict. More division. More extreme versions of the other side. Over time, your perception of reality shifts. Not because the world suddenly became more extreme, but because you're being shown the most extreme slices of it. Again and again. And again. Now combine all three forces. Economic pressure. Perceived scarcity. Algorithmic amplification. And you get something powerful. People who feel stressed. Competing for what they believe is limited, while constantly being shown reasons to distrust and dislike each other. That's not random. That's a system producing predictable behavior. But here's where it gets uncomfortable. Because hate, in this context, isn't just an accident. It's useful. Not to individuals, but to the system itself. Think about it. If people are busy blaming each other, they're not questioning larger structures. If frustration is directed sideways, it never moves upward. Division becomes a kind of pressure release valve. It keeps the system stable, even when people inside it feel unstable. And historically, this pattern shows up again and again. Periods of economic stress often come with increased polarization, not because people suddenly become worse, but because the environment changes how they behave. The incentives shift. Now here's the irony. Most people don't actually want conflict. They want stability, security, a sense of progress. But when those things feel threatened, the brain switches modes. It becomes defensive, protective, tribal. And tribal thinking is simple. It divides the world into us and them. It reduces complexity. It creates clarity, even if that clarity is false. And once someone is placed in the them category, empathy drops. Fast. Because it's easier to dislike a category than to understand a person. So small differences become big ones. Disagreements become identity. And identity becomes something to defend. At all costs. But let's step back for a second. Because there's something important hiding beneath all this. The math. Not emotional math. Actual structural math. If productivity rises, if technology improves, if total wealth in a society increases, then in theory, life should get easier for most people. But that only happens if distribution keeps pace. If it doesn't, then you get growth without relief. More wealth, but concentrated. More output, but unevenly shared. And when people sense that imbalance, even if they can't fully explain it, they feel it. In their daily lives, in their stress levels, in their uncertainty about the future. And feelings like that don't stay quiet. They look for expression. Sometimes as frustration. Sometimes as anxiety. And sometimes as anger toward other people who are simply navigating the same system. That's the uncomfortable part. Because the person you're told to blame is often dealing with the exact same pressures. Different background. Different beliefs. Same underlying stress. But the system doesn't highlight that similarity. It highlights the differences. Because differences create friction. And friction creates engagement. And engagement is profitable. So here we are. A world where people are more connected than ever. But feel more divided than ever. Where information is abundant. But understanding feels scarce. Where most individuals are trying to survive the same pressures. But end up seeing each other as the problem. So the question isn't just, why do people hate each other so much? It's deeper than that. What if the hate isn't the root problem, but a symptom, a signal, a side effect of systems that quietly shape how we think, compete, and connect? And if that's true, then the real question becomes, if the pressure keeps rising, and the incentives don't change, what happens next?